This episode of The Business Coach, I'm going to actually dive into two specific coaching conversations I've had in the recent past with two different clients who are negotiating some major business transactions. And I'll give you the exact strategies, the exact tactics for the negotiations, the coaching that I gave to them. The hope and the goal is when you leave this particular episode of The Business Coach, that you are armed with some better thinking about how you can structure future significant negotiations to have even better outcomes, anywhere from $8 to $15 million at stake.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Well, hello, welcome to another edition of The Business Coach. In this episode, I want to talk about two really valuable business negotiations that two of our clients are actually actively working through. Over the summer, I took some time off and I came back, and there were some negotiations I was helping some clients with, and I want to go through what they were. In total, these negotiations are worth somewhere between $8 to $15 million of value at stake. One was a business merger where the counterpart to our client wanted to reduce the value of our client's business in the merger so that he would have a smaller share. That's with a medical group that he owns. The second negotiation that I want to walk you through is another client of ours who is a manufacturer who is going to license a third-party product, and they were negotiating the royalty and the distributor relationship, basically the IP arrangement, wherein he could get sole exclusive rights to it in North America for a product that's been successful for many years in Europe. And again, aggregate value of what's at stake here, somewhere between $8 and $15 million. And you think about how many negotiations have you run in your business life, and we tend to just do them. We just go through our normal kind of rote way of doing a negotiation. And in some cases we're good at it, in some cases we're not good at it, but rarely do we ever get the benefit of an outside person to help create the strategy before you go in there. So today I want to give you how those conversations went. Specifically, I want to talk through what I'll call setting the negotiating frame, and I'll give you an example of how that meant, probably $10 million for our client in that conversation. Literally, just from an hour conversation he and I had. It was a walk. He actually flew out to see me here in Jackson, and we spent some time taking a walk by the side of the Snake River. The second conversation we'll call the negotiating tactic. We call it a unit shift. A unit shift. And I'm going to talk about how that made such a different impact in terms of the negotiating strategy. So going back to this first one here, let's set that frame. So our client owns a medical group, and they do a specialty they're a specialty practice, and they have two up and running clinics that do quite a bit of volume. I'm going to change the numbers so that they're not identifiable in both case studies out of respect, but all of them are based deeply on actual clients. So if you can imagine, these two clinics are doing, figure round numbers, 10 million in volume per year. And he's got 3 more clinics that are just about up and ready to launch. And he's negotiating how he's going to merge with another group that's roughly the same size that he is, maybe a little bit more in volume, but not quite so much in terms of profitability. And that negotiation was such that the person who wanted to do the merger didn't want to give value to the 3 clinics that had not yet generated any revenue. His argument was, well, hang on, these are 3 clinics. They're still an unknown. They haven't been started. They're still going to require some more cost outlays. And quite frankly, there's no revenue from them, so there's no profitability. That should just be part of what we're doing. And so we should only look at our existing clinics and your existing clinics that are generating revenue. And our client was at a little bit of a loss. He knew there was value with that because it takes, in his world, anywhere from 6 to 12 months to put together the pieces to have a new clinic be ready to open. He's got to find the location. He's got to secure the location, do the tenant improvements to make it work for their type of specialty medical services that they do. He's got to set up the referral relationships so that he can have some volume be ready. He's got to make sure he's found the right doctors who are going to staff that. Or in his case, some people who are going to, from other clinics, part-time travel over early on. And in his world, it takes at least 6, sometimes 12 to 18 months to get the pieces in alignment so that over the course of the next 12, 24 months, once they open the doors, within 24 months, those clinics are up and running and successful and profitable. But that means from the very beginning, it might be a 24 to 36 months process or a little bit more from start to getting them profitable. So he didn't know in the negotiation how to do that. So I told him to say, make a context shift, right? Set the negotiating frame this way. Talk to the other person. Let's say the other person's name was, we'll use Tina. So Tina was the counterpart in the negotiation. We'll say our client's name was Carl. So Carl, I said, tell Tina the following. So Tina, I'm hearing from you that you think we should focus just on your existing 4 clinics and my existing 3 clinics, and that's what we should focus on. And your reasons for wanting to focus on them, make sure that I'm accurate here, are because that's where the revenue and profit is currently done. These other 3 clinics are an unknown. They may or may not be profitable down the road, but there's no revenue. They haven't launched just yet. And so you think that whatever we negotiate on the merger, we should give value to your part and my part based on existing clinics with existing revenue, with existing profits. Am I understanding that correctly? And Tina says, yes, you are. Tina, tell me more about why you don't feel there's value in these other 3, even though we both know that down the road that they will be generating good stuff. Tell me why you think they should be separate from what we're talking about here. And let Tina talk for a while. And then I coached Carl. I said, okay, at some point after she's told you why she thinks those things should be separate and not included, I want you to use the reporter pattern. What I'm hearing from you, Tina, is language she just said, language she just said, language she just said. Am I understanding you correctly? Did I get it accurate? Tell me more about this. He's building negotiating routes wherein Tina's giving all the rationale why that we should discount these other parts. And we're essentially setting up a bit of a move. And here's the shift, the negotiating frame we're about to shift on Tina. Once she's firmly entrenched about why we should discount these 3 new clinics that are going to be coming online over the next 6 to 12 months, away from any valuations, calculations for the merger and who should own what portion. Now Carl gets to say, well, Tina, we can do it your way if you want to. If you really feel that we should not put value to those clinics, I'm willing to keep them separate. So we'll do the merger and the conversation about who owns what % of a joint entity based on existing, your 4 clinics and my 3 clinics, based on existing revenue and especially existing EBITDA, profit. But then what's going to happen is I'm still going to grow these other 3 clinics. Why? I've got $1 million of time and money investing in those parts, and we both know that over time they'll be more valuable. Now, we can come back in 3 years, 4 years, and we'll see if we want to basically absorb those 3 locations. And if we do want to absorb those 3 locations, it'll be based on the existing revenue and profit down the road in that 3 to 5 year period of time. In the interim, I'll run those clinics, and I'll do that in independently of our joint venture here. If that way. Now, what happens is Tina comes back and says, well, wait. No, those should be included. Well, hang on, Tina, you've just told me, and use her own language right back. That's the context. You've just told me that they don't have value, that there's a risk involved, that there's no way for us to know how they actually will perform. And I'm willing to honor what you've said, but I know that those have value, so I'll keep it separate and I'll do that independent. I'll still put my full-time effort into our joint business like we've agreed to, but I'll do those on the side. I've already done all the work. Like I said, I've got $1 million of time and money invested in those locations that are coming online over the next 6 months or so. Now, of course, Tina, if you want to give us a reasonable value for those, like I told you before, I'm willing to take a bit of a discount on what the future value is likely to be on those because it's up front and put those together, but I'm certainly not willing to take 0 value for that. And Tina, let me just ask you a direct question. If you were me and you had $1 million of time and money ready to have 3 new locations going, knowing all that you know about building your 4 locations, knowing that within 24 to 36 months, those locations are each going to be generating $1 million or more of profit, wouldn't you expect to get something for them in any kind of merger evaluation? Yeah. So again, your choice here. I can either keep them separate, in which case we'll negotiate to bring them back in at a future date based on a future valuation, or we're going to have to give me some reasonable and fair valuation of that into this joint calculation. And again, stepping out of that negotiation, what we called that was setting the negotiating frame. We've changed the frame. We've let Tina talk about how those 3 new locations are unknown, they're risky, they don't have a value that you can put your finger on right now. And we say, great, if that's the case, we'll keep those separate. Sometimes in a negotiation, you have to shock somebody. They're pushing so hard to say some element is incredibly high value or incredibly low value for some element of it. So you can separate that out and call their bluff, so to speak. Okay, we'll keep this separate, and I'll sell it later on, or something along those lines. That's the first one. And based on the valuation and how that is, that's probably worth for our client anywhere from $8 to $12 million right there from that one change. He knew he needed to get value for it. He knew that. Carl knew he needed to get value. He just didn't know how to do that in the negotiation. And I'll say this again, sometimes the best thing you can do when you prepare for a big negotiation is to talk it through with someone from the outside, and that person can see what's going on with a bit of emotional distance. Plus, for example, in this case, as this coach, I've been involved in those types of negotiations probably 10x more times, either directly or probably 100x more times when I think about all the times I've done it through clients or with clients. So that's one of the values of working with someone who's kind of that outside perspective. He or she likely has been in that situation and coached other people who have been in that situation, so they have 10 to 100 times the exposure, the experience set to draw upon to help you. The second reason why it's so valuable is they don't have any of the emotional vulnerability that you do in the negotiation. I'm giving them input there, but I'm not the one that's actually talking to Tina and has to deal with her strong or whatever personality style she has. So it's easy for me to be emotionally distant to give him better input. And Carl gets to lean on me so that when he's in that negotiation, he gets to borrow my confidence because I've given him that input about this is how it will likely go. And we game it out. If this, then we have this choice or this choice. If it's choice number 1, here are the 3 possibilities. If it's possibility 1, here's what we do. If it's possibility 2, here's what we do. If it's possibility 3, here's what we do. So when you think about preparing for a major negotiation, having yourself game it out to think through, here's how I think they're going to respond. If they respond this way, then I can do this or this, which is my best move. But if they respond differently, then I have this is how I'll counter respond to that. And we can game that through one by one like a decision tree. And since I work with plenty of different medical folks, we call that a differential diagnosis, or that decision tree is called that in the medical frame. So let's go to our next negotiation, if we will. So the takeaway from that first negotiation is to set the frame, right? If Tina doesn't feel like those other clinics have value, or they're more of a risk or an uncertainty that you can't put a value to, great. Let's take them out and I'll do them separate, and later on I'll bring them back in as something that possibly we could acquire. The second one is about what I'll call a unit shift. So our client, got to think of a name for our client here. We'll call our client, let's call our client Paul. So our client Paul is a manufacturer, and he was going to license off a particular IP from a company in Europe that had successfully sold a particular product for many, many years. And the owner of the European company wanted to make money from North America. They were retiring from their business to some degree, or at least stepping out of the active part. And they thought, we've never cracked the American continent very well, whether it be Canada or the US or even Mexico. They were probably most interested in the US market. Why? Because it was, dwarfs Canada and Mexico in terms of their particular product. And, when you look at it, they have things like VAT tax, value added tax, and international shipping tariffs, and it made it difficult for them to sell to the US when they manufactured in Europe to sell to the US versus our client, Paul, he makes his stuff here in North America. There's no tariffs, no value-added tax. He can sell and has a real pricing advantage to do that, which is a really good thing for him. The demand was here in the U.S. So now originally they started talking about, and I'm going to come do a little bit on the board here. So they started talking about how can we talk about a royalty of 5 to 8% of every product sold. So, for example, we're just going to do our math here to make it clean. If I sold a product and I had $100 of revenue, again, the numbers were different than this, but we'll just use that for the moment. The owner who was negotiating said I should get $5 to $8 per unit that you sell as my royalty. And our client might have been willing to do that, actually. The margins were such that he might have been able to make this work. But it wasn't really a smart thing for him to do. He really should not have done that. And so we counseled him and said, well, first of all, doing a royalty based on revenue is the wrong unit. Watch this move we're about to make here. A royalty based on revenue is the wrong unit. You're taking on the risk you've got. In his world, let's do some numbers here. I'm going to use a kind of a really round number part, but this works out roughly. So in their business world, let's say they did $10 million of business. Of that, they're going to have cost of goods sold to manufacture, all in cost to manufacture, round numbers, about $5 million, which is roughly 50%. What that means is for every dollar sold, they're going to generate 50 cents of gross profit, because they have a gross profit margin of 50%. Okay, you got me here so far. Now, they also have other expenses. And these other expenses include marketing costs, sales cost, overhead, administration. They've got accounting that they've got to do, etc. All the other business costs. And in their world, they might have these other pieces be, again, I'm just going to round off, 30% of revenue, which means in our example here, if it's $10 million of revenue from this new product line that they've licensed off, they might have $3 million of expenses in addition to the cost to manufacture the products, which means that when all's said and done, that $10 million of revenue led to $2 million of operating profit, which gives you an operating profit margin of 20%. Of every dollar sold, 20% becomes profit. And actually the numbers I'm sharing with you here are typically a little bit higher. In a manufacturing part, I doubt they're going to have a 20% profit margin. But the moves that I shared with Paul will make sense off this. I said, Paul, I want you to talk with your counterpart here. Again, I never talk about the other side as the opposition. I always say, I want you to talk about them as your counterpart in this dance of the negotiation. And I want you to start off by saying, okay, well, let's look at this here. So right now, you guys have how much in sales in your North America sales that you currently do? Got it. So you have X. Now, of the money that you have, revenue that you have, what's your cost of goods sold to manufacture and fulfill, which includes shipping and tariffs for your products in the U.S.? And their number is actually higher than probably 50% because they have more cost that they have to account for. But we'll just keep it as if it's the same. Got it. So for every dollar you sell, you've got 50 cents of gross profit. Now, what are the other expenses in your business? I know we run a very similar business. So in your world, when you look at it, for every dollar sold, what percent of that actually drops to the bottom line pre-tax profit? Got it. 20% or 20 cents. That's roughly what we are, right? So let me ask a different question. Right now, you want us to sell in North America because, number one, we have a good experience set for selling similar products in North America. We've got a good distribution and marketing base to do that. We've got some good track record around that. I think that's true. Plus, because we don't have the same, issues with value-added tax, VAT tax, and tariffs, we can sell at a more competitive price, which makes it easier. Because our costs are a little bit different than yours would be coming from overseas. But let me ask this question. If we could help you in the next 5 years sell $1 million more of the product or $10 million more of the product, and we know that, for example, if $10 million of product is being sold, that there's going to be $2 million of actual profit before tax. What do you feel would be a fair royalty percentage of our profit to pay over to you relative for us to grow the market and to do this for you? Note the unit shift. Originally, the conversation was, what's the percent royalty based off of revenue? We do not want to make the percent royalty based off of revenue. We don't want to do that because it's too big of a number. We want to make it a bigger number based on a bigger percent based on a smaller number. So in the example here, we might give away 10% of operating profit as a royalty. And chances are it's going to probably be closer to 5%. But maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 10%. I think they could have got it for 5%. But it's 5% of what that operating profit would be. Again, it's a hands-off, no-risk thing for the other party. Now, what will often come up in a conversation like this is the person would agree in principle to the 5 or 10% of operating profit, but they're concerned that you play around with the numbers. David, how do I know you're not going to have expenses and that they don't make sense? So we can equate this percentage of operating profit back to a much smaller 1-2% of revenue. So there's no way to play with the number. It's a very objective number that can't be through financial chicanery like they do with movies and investors for that. Can't be done with creative accounting. Revenue is a very stable number. But by starting and getting to this in principle, the 5 to 10% royalty of operating profit is generally a fair thing. That equates to, in our example here, probably 1 or 2% royalty on revenue. Notice what we've just done. We've reduced to 1/5 the royalty rate or more. It's worth millions of dollars to this client if the business goes big over the next 5 or 10 years. It's a big, big, big deal. So when you think about that, I guess I'll put it this way. When you're negotiating with the other party, I want you to think about, sometimes we have to think about a unit shift, which means how do we change it from talking about X to talking about the units of Y. In our example, we didn't talk about a percent of revenue. We got it to a percent of profit, even if we later had to translate that percent of profit, which was much smaller, to a smaller percent of revenue. It's a big deal with that negotiation. Just as a side note to fill it out, there were 2 other elements for that negotiation that would be really important. One was exclusivity, and 2 would be the duration of that licensing arrangement. Our client, Paul, if he develops a marketplace in the U.S. on a 3-year agreement with exclusive rights to North America for 3 years, the biggest risks he runs is he has now pioneered the marketplace. He's created the demand. He's got the sales channels. The business wants it. He's done all the marketing to get the branding accepted in the marketplace. But how does he make sure he protects himself from the European company from pulling back that and basically selling direct or giving it to another manufacturer, the rights to that? And so the way he protects himself is he has an agreement that says, okay, hey, as long as we perform at a certain minimal level, we have the automatic right to renew this agreement for an additional 3 years or for an additional 5 years. And that's a rolling thing. So they have the rights locked up long term, a really important part. So in an example here, if they're only selling, I'll make up a number here, $100,000 worth of products to the U.S., and that's a low bar, great. As long as we maintain that by year 3, if we get to that same volume and we maintain that, then anything that or higher means we get to renew the agreement. Oh, no, we're already doing that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. So we'll guarantee that by the end of year 2, we'll have at least that same volume, and in year 3 we'll have grown the volume by at least 5%. Right, now you're into the different part of the negotiation, but you want to make sure that you would get the ongoing rights to that. So I know this was a specific negotiation, but the same things were true. Our client, in this case we'll call him Paul, he was so close to that conversation with the owner of that company in Europe that he didn't have the perspective and the emotional distance to see this accurately. And so what you need in any negotiation, this is really important, is somebody that you can sharpen your negotiation strategy and game it out. They do this, then you do this. They do this, then you have these two choices. Go one way or the other. If you go here, here's how they're likely to respond. And by doing that, it allows you to go into that negotiation really ready. Now, you can't do this for everything. If you're going to be buying a $25,000 asset, it's probably not worth taking 10 hours of negotiating prep. At most what you really have at risk there is 25 grand, and realistically it's a lot less than that. But if you're talking about a negotiation, like our examples here of a business merger, or in this case exclusive royalty arrangements to license off for a royalty payment a particular product, you're talking about millions of dollars of value. This is worth the time to prepare for the dance of the negotiation, and part of that means you're going to have someone outside of you who can give you that context, perspective, experience set to sharpen your thinking, so when you go into that negotiation, you're fully ready. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this edition of The Business Coach. It's been a lot of fun talking about these specific coaching situations that have come up here in the very near past here for me. I have clients of ours that are dealing with real situations. I hope you can use the same to help you in your future business negotiation that you have. I wish you the very best.